Greetings. Many kids struggle with math in school. And when I talk to some of the parents of students who have struggled, some of them believe that math ability is inherent. Now, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know whether children are born with the ability to do math or not. But one thing I do know is that there are people out there who have helped students turn things around. One of those people is a colleague of mine, Johanna Ihegihu. She is the director, owner, founder of a company called Math, Etc. In Bowie, Maryland. She's been able to work with students with some consultation and to be able to help them go from struggling to succeeding and excelling. So if you have questions about math or how things can be turned around and you want to sit in and listen in on this conversation, that would be great. Go grab a cup of a hot beverage and join me as I talk with Johanna about how to turn things around in math.
Hi, my name is Johanna Ihegihu. I'm currently the director at Math ETC. It's a learning center in Bowie. We also have another location in Olney. We work with students in kindergarten through 12th grade. And our job is to serve the families, is to get them ready for high school, get them ready for college, get them ready for life, and hope that whatever contribution we've added to their life helps them to become fully prepared to be contributing member of community and society. So we've been doing this for 10 years and we're excited about what we do.
Wow. Yeah, earlier you were saying that you've seen somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 students. Is that true?
That is close. That is true. We've seen a lot of students from over 70 something schools,
Wow.
public school, private school, church schools, independent school. And that gives us a breadth of view, a wide breadth of view. So we can actually see curriculums and compare them. We can actually see student performance and compare them. And we also have seen homeschoolers. So we have a wide spectrum of experience in terms of dealing with students. Mm-hmm. So that is true.
And you also talked about, I also saw on your website that you have, you do diagnostic tests. So you do that at the beginning when people come and say they want to receive service?
So a year after we started, we realized it was really hard for us to determine the strengths and weaknesses of students. Because most students come to you from different schools and you really don't know where they're struggling or why they're struggling. So we do offer a diagnostic assessment, which is also adaptive. And when the students come in for math, the test can measure what they've learned or mastered. All the way from kindergarten through 7th grade or even higher. And for us, that's different from a regular test because it doesn't give you a pass or fail. It doesn't give you a percentage. It just tells you, you know A, you don't know B. You've mastered C, you haven't mastered D. And that was a game changer for us because we can then focus on the weaknesses and get them to become strong in that. And we can also reinforce the strengths. So it's been a game changer. We love the diagnostic test. It's very helpful. And it's also a good tool for data-driven help for the students.
So when our boys took the PSAT, I remember that when it came back, it would break out the tests into those kinds of segments so that you knew, same thing. So the PSAT was both a way of measuring progress. It was a way of potentially preparing students or qualifying students for scholarships. But the other part is that the diagnosis also that people get. But the difference is that when you do yours, it then prepares you to be able to provide service for those students, right?
Exactly. And the PSAT is amazing, but most students don't do it until 10th grade, when they're getting into it. At that point, if you are missing fundamental skills, it's really difficult and daunting to give that back to you.
Wow.
The beauty of the diagnostic assessment that we do is we can do it in 2nd grade, in 3rd grade, in 4th grade. So we can get on it very quickly and provide the missing link. A case in point I would like to share was a student came to us and he wasn't doing well in math and his parents were very frustrated. And he was only missing one concept. He did not understand how to add or subtract negative numbers.
Oh, wow.
But that wasn't everything. That's in algebra, that's in geometry, that's used through math. And when we did the assessment, he had excellent mastery of all the topics and concepts, But when it came to negative numbers, it was a glaring red.
Okay.
So we were able to pull him aside, and I'll tell you, it took 3 people to teach it to him. His mind was just not accepting it. Like numbers can be negative and it doesn't follow the other rules. But we had 3 different people explain it, and finally he got it, and he was on his way to success. So that's the beauty of the diagnostic assessment. You can narrow down almost like an X-ray and say, this is what's wrong. This is where the student fell off.
Okay, so you just said so much right there that I want to unpack. So this is what I heard in what you just said. First of all, the idea of math being a system of layers, and that in order to understand the more advanced concepts, there are fundamental concepts that you have to get down, else they will find their way into destabilizing your your understanding of higher concepts. That's one thing. The second thing is the idea of having multiple people explain the same concept. And there's still things I'm trying to learn. And what's really interesting is that I have found that if I find different ways of explaining the same concept, like going on the web, eventually, like understanding will take place. So I can relate to that even myself. And I guess the third thing is, the idea of, again, it's like proving the value of having a diagnostic test so that you could see the range of things that a student may, the range of things that a student may be good at or maybe are struggling with. So a question, so what other kinds of errors do you see students making? If you sort of aggregate and think about, like what kinds of errors seem to rise to the top for the students that come to you?
You were right about what you got from what I said. All 3 of them are correct. The first one is math is very sequential. We teach something at the beginning of all of our math course, which I teach myself. It's called number sense. A lot of people know how many alphabets we have in the English language. We have 26. And with the 26 alphabet, or letters in the alphabet, I should say, letters in the alphabet, we can make many words. We can see CAT, cat, ACT, act. The same for math. We only have 10 digits. And all of math is 10 digits. So we move them around and we make different numbers. So we try to teach that we are on a denary system. We are on a base 10 system. So when students get that concept, then it almost gives them a scope. I'm not going to see any number outside of 0 to 9. And it's going to come in different weights and different arrangements. So it kind of gives them a bigger scope. And once they grasp the number sense, numbers make sense.
Right.
It actually makes sense to them. So you are right. A lot of our students, when we see them, the errors we see is that they're missing the fundamentals. They don't understand the scope of numbers. They don't understand how they fit together. It looks like a mystery. Why do we have a point here and it's a decimal point? Because it's less than 10. And we just came up with a way to express it. Why do we have this side and it's different from this side? So once they get the number sense and they understand that computers are based on binary system, we count in the 10. So we get to 10, we go to 20. This is the 1 and the 2 repeating itself. And we keep going in the same system. Once they see that sequence, everything begins to come together. So the biggest challenge I see why students struggle in math is that they do not get good instruction, or if they get it, they didn't receive it. Fundamentals, the number sense, how numbers come together. And I think if we can express that to students and the way we do it with reading and with other subjects, it will develop the love of math and math will make sense, finally.
So what could parents do, like right off the bat, to provide that kind of number sense? I have another anecdote to share after this, because of another conversation we had about another way to think about fundamental errors. But to build off of what you just said, what could parents do, like right off the bat, with their younger children?
Once they get engaged, I think parents are the biggest advocate for their children. When I talk to parents, I say to them, you're cheerleaders. The students get a lot of negatives from the environment. They get what I call the scare of math from their peers. And you as their parent needs to be the cheerleader. So we need to help them change their psychology about math and saying it's fun, it's easy, it's in everyday life. Play games with them early, show them how numbers come together, show them shapes and patterns in nature around you, the table. So one of our favorite way of teaching measurement is measuring things around the center. You measure tables and you find the perimeter. You measure tables and you find the area of the table. After a while, it becomes, okay, yeah, I need to put a carpet in my room. I need to find the area. I need to put a fence around my yard. I need the perimeter, because perimeter means around the edges. So once you make it part of their everyday life and you engage them in cooking and measurement, baking cake, mixing juices, coffee. My favorite thing to teach fraction is pizza. I always order a big box of pizza when I'm teaching fractions, because we cut it into 8 all the time, and you think one slice is 1 out of 8. So they begin to see it around them, and it makes that part of their life. And it's not such a abstract concept that's out there. It's everyday. It's everyday life. So I think that parents can do that by being engaged, being involved, and just talking math with their kids every day.
Yeah, so you hit on that other one, and at the very end, yeah, we were having that conversation about abstract concepts. I want to invoke in this moment Robert Moses, as we had discussed before, civil rights leader who wrote the book Radical Equations, and he just passed away last year. So the Algebra Project, which he started, still exists, and they still have programming. But the point of it for this conversation is to talk about one of the things that he discovered as well, which we discussed, was this difficulty that students had with dealing in dealing with abstract concepts. So could you talk about that a little bit more? So, one, I think you probably just said it with what you said with pizza, but talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we live in a sanitized society. A society where there's no transaction that is concrete anymore. Everything is abstract. And for the younger students that we're seeing today, they were born in the 2000s, and they've not really had to deal with cash. They've not had to move anything. They don't lay the carpet in their room. They don't measure anything. They just, everything's been pre-done for them. And that creates a difficulty when it comes to understanding abstract concepts. Because for other generations or maybe other societies where these things are still part of their day, this is part of their plaything. So when you're playing sand castle, you're building sand, you're pouring it, you're fixing it, you're measuring it, you know how many scoops go there, you're counting. I think that's something that is now missing for our younger generation, and therefore it's harder for them to understand math concepts. If you were never part of the project to put a fence around your house, how then do you understand how to measure perimeter? It's basically putting those boxes and saying, okay, this is 12 yards. I need 12 of 12. And so I think what he said is true. Math is a bit of an abstract, but it shouldn't be abstract until you get to like higher level math. But we're seeing students see it as abstract concepts even in younger grades. And that's something we can definitely address. That's something that can be fixed. That's something we can introduce to our students earlier by making it part of everyday life, taking them shopping, giving them $10 to buy anything that's less than $10 at the gas station. Help them pump. Ask them to help you pump. And how many gallons did we buy? How much did we pay? Getting them involved in this everyday things that we're engaged in that use math. It's amazing. Everything we do has to do with math. Everything around us.
So that's interesting, because as you're describing that, it's making me think about what abstract means. So in one way, abstract is taking a topic like fractions and bringing fractions from a discussion about the number 1/2 or 1/8 into, a slice of pizza that has 8 slices. Right, so that's a way of thinking about a fraction that's written as a number, and that's abstract because it's written as a number, and bringing it into the physical realm by talking about a piece of pizza. But then there's the other one, and you were talking about the earlier student who had problems with negative numbers, and so one could argue that a negative number is even more sort of abstract, because with all the other examples, you're dealing with something that you have and working with something that you have, but with negative numbers, you're working with something that you don't have, right? It's so, in that case, it's even more abstract. But so take us through the process. Like if a student came to you, like what happens first? If somebody knocks on your door and the parent, has a child, let's say a child is in 8th grade, right? So a child is in 8th grade and, the parent says, my child wants to get into advanced math because, they want to, they're trying to get into a particular school or whatever, but they're struggling. So like, what would you do with a child in that situation?
That's interesting. So the first thing for us is to do a consult. And in the consult, we're trying to find out what's going on. And this may lead us into other areas. Sometimes what we see in 8th grade when they're struggling with math is because they can't read. That's so funny because a lot of parents don't even connect the dot. Math in the US now is a subset of reading. We do a lot of word problems. So when a kid has no, we call it difficulty reading, they can read, but they don't comprehend what they're reading because they're reading with what we call labored reading. So their brain is working so hard to read that they don't have any energy left to comprehend what they're reading. So they read it, but it makes no sense to them. They're not getting the gist of what you're saying. So therefore, even if their math skills was not impaired, they couldn't solve the problem. So that's one thing we see. So we do a consult to try and figure out. It's our pre-screening, pre-assessment, what's going on, tell us the history of the child. Are we dealing with gap knowledge, gap learning? Now, some kids have moved school so many times, that's another thing that affects learning. There needs to be stability and structure. So if they moved a lot, the schools are not aligned. So they might have learned something in one school and they didn't continue in another place. So they have all these gaps in their learning. So we do that first consult to figure out what's going on.
Okay.
After we're done with that, then we move into an assessment. Now we're going into data. So we've collected soft data, I should say, from what the parents are describing, what the student is saying, what we're perceiving. We're doing our own assessment. Then we go into data. So when the child takes a diagnostic adaptive test, we're looking at data here. This is always the point of contention because sometimes the parents are like, my child is so brilliant. He's an excellent math student. He had A's in all his middle school and elementary school. This test is wrong. But our test is a test of mastery. It's not testing your grades. We're not concerned about your grades. We're looking at what you've mastered. And after that, then we decide what package of tutoring they need. And then we start with number sense and we start to cover the gaps and also try to address the weaknesses and also strengthen the areas where they're doing well. So that's a typical approach for an 8th grader. And we also do what we call goal setting. Where are you going? And this might be interesting because when we first started, we assumed everybody was planning to go to a 4-year college.
Right.
That was just off the bat. You came into us, we're pushing you hard. We're saying, okay, you're going to 4-year college. You need these building blocks to be in place. But then we met more students and we realized not everybody had that goal. Not everybody was on the same track. So we also include goal setting to say, what are your ultimate goals for this child? And to the child, what are you trying to accomplish? What schools are you trying to go to? That will determine how much work you need to cover to get to where you're going. So it's almost, I would say, a soft science.
Yes. That's really good that you pointed to that. It's a topic that I'm going to cover later, but the idea of achievement is something that can be expanded. So the way that I've been talking about it in previous blogs and the way that, and I think about, where our children went to school and the competitive nature of that school and the aspirations that, that we had, I need to be open to the fact that not every family may have the same thoughts about where their child wants to go, should go, and that's the. I'm glad that you mentioned that because so what makes the conversation more difficult is thinking about how it is that families arrive at whatever aspirations they have. So what we wouldn't want to see happening is for families to be dissuaded from going to college if they otherwise would be, willing to go or wanting to go, or for bad experiences in education to diminish expectations, right? We wouldn't want to see that, but finding the balance between sort of internal motivation to achieve versus sort of external, negative external forces changing that formula, for families. I'm trying to get into that space. Now, there's an interesting report that was just done by the Center for Education and the Workforce out of Georgetown University. The report they did looked at 3 different kinds of pathways for students. So one of them is, high school to a job. The other is a community college to a job, and the other is a 4-year skill-based or trade-oriented schools headed to a job, or traditional 4-year college. And what they're saying in the report is that, these days there are still several pathways for a student, if all we're really talking about is making sure that the student gets a good job, right? So again, what they're doing is they're expanding that conversation about what goals, families should have. So again, I think that that's something that could be probed a little bit more when it comes to talking to families about how they got to where they are with regard to their aspirations.
You are right on point. I know you hit the nail on the head. How did they come to this point whereby they don't have aspirations to go X, Y, Z, while some other families may have it? I think we're now going into the area of subconscious conditioning. You cannot want what you don't know, and you cannot desire what you've never been exposed to. But I have a philosophy, a mindset on this. I think that just like we talk about due process in the legal system, I think education should prepare everyone in kindergarten, elementary, middle, and high school to make a choice. But you should not show up at the gate. And I say this to my students, like, you're going to watch a movie, the fee is $10 and you have $9.99, and somebody else has $5. Who's going to get in? And the students look at me and say, the person with $9.99. And I said, no, not both of them are not getting it. The fee is $10.
Right.
So both of you are short. So we should not have students showing up at the end of high school short if they wanted to go to college. They should be prepared. So if they choose to go to a trade school, they're still good at the trade school. They just made that choice because that's their preference. If they decide to go into music and sing and rap, they're still educated rappers. If they decide to go into media and become an actor or an actress, they're still educated. So I am of the philosophy that every student should be given equal opportunity to make a choice at the end of high school. What we're having, which you're alluding to, is that some schools are preparing kids and some schools are not preparing them well enough. So what happens is we have a group of kids who want to go further, but they cannot. They just don't have what it takes to go further. So they are being forced into this lower aspiration, if we may say that, or different aspirations, or they're folding or molding into what they don't really desire. Their goals are short. So I am saying what we can do as educators is to level the playing field, close the achievement gap, prepare every preschool kid to be able to read, help every elementary school understand the concepts of math and reading. Then they go on into middle school, and the same thing is done. And then in high school, they begin to specialize. Then they're making a true choice. If you really don't have that choice, it's a false choice. You're showing up at the door of the movie theater with $5, $8.99, $9.20. The fee is $10. You're not getting it anyway. So in my opinion, everyone should have equal chance to make a true choice. A choice is not a true choice if it's not something you can execute. It's a false choice.
That's excellent. So what that has me thinking about right now is the idea of standards. So states have standards. There's a Common Core that states have when it comes to public schools, and that Common Core is supposed to express state by state what they believe the minimum standard for knowledge should be for each student in all subjects. Now, one of the issues with Common Core is that, actually, I said it wrong. What Common Core is supposed to do is to provide a standard across states, right? As opposed to each state having their own. And what happens is that each state wants to have their own standard and doesn't want the federal government to impose a standard. But what can happen is that one state's standard could be much lower than another state. So states like Maryland, which actually turned out to be, usually turn out to be at the top of ranking when it comes to the preparation of students, their standard for math could be, here in terms of, maybe knowing algebra 2 or knowing calculus. That's another way, perhaps describing it, just as an example, where in another state, maybe all that's required is algebra, for each student. I'm simplifying it, but it's a way of showing a difference between the level of math that might be expected in one state versus another. But the way that you just described, thinking about what our students should be able to do, that analogy of being prepared with enough money to go into the movie cinema, suggests that perhaps we should have our own standard, a standard that recognizes what is needed for students to go out into the world and be successful, but is not dependent upon a state standard. And I think what could happen to us is that we could be thinking about, what teacher X is saying or school system X is saying with regard to what our students need to know. But that might not actually be sufficient given where a student wants to be. And even more than that, it could turn out that in a certain school system, they may not be exposed, to your point earlier, to certain levels of math because it's just simply not offered in their district. So what do you see a way of math, et cetera, helping parents to form a standard for learning, or a standard of excellence that, for whatever level, for wherever they want to go, but a standard of excellence that is not dependent upon what a state, what their state might be suggesting for them?
Thank you, Arnold. That you just touched on my dream. That's like a deep heart desire for me. And we work on that every day. We tell people when they come to us, like we said earlier, we have over 75 schools. Mm-hmm. So we don't cater to any particular school. Mm-hmm. We're looking at a global standard, actually. We're not even looking at a national standard. We're saying we're looking at a global standard, and we're benchmarking that. And we're saying, take the pressure of grades off of US parents. Put that aside for a quick second and think about mastery. Think about what your child knows. So we have a part of our tutoring that's called Recall for Mastery. So if you come into our center, you'll see whiteboards on every wall. And the reason is, after we teach you, we have the student go up to the board and re-teach the subject. So if I teach you decimals, I'm hoping you can go on the board and teach me decimal back. That way you've mastered it. You know, you own it forever. So you are correct. I would love to see a situation or a program that can be used across the US to teach number sense with no pressure of grades. How about learning for knowing? Right. How about just knowing something, not because you want to get an A or because you want to go here. It's just taking the pressure of grades off and helping our students enjoy and love learning and become, comfortable sharing their knowledge with their peers. And it becomes a fad, something that's cool. Almost to be able to know math and to tell what you know and to share with your friends. I think some schools that are independent have been able to accomplish that. They don't have grades until 5th grade and 6th grade, but most of our public school system and church schools have this pressure of grades hanging over the parents and the kids, and they're watching some grade book in the thing, and the kid gets an 80, they come into tutoring, once he gets a 90, they're out of it. So the pressure is on the grades instead of on learning. And I think if you can redirect that we would have more success with our students closing the achievement gap. Because it really doesn't matter what your grades are. And I'm going to end on this note. I joke with parents when they come all stressed out about grades, and I'm saying, what do you want? And they say, I want my child to get all A's. I'm like, I can fix that. So I'll take a piece of paper, I'll write a big A, and I'll sign my name, and I say, you can take that home.
Right.
You know, after all is said and done, when your child knows what they know, they're going to find their way to where they're going. If they're in another country, if they're in another location, they'll still know what they know. So put the attention on mastery instead of grades. So I think that should be part of the conversation.
That's awesome. Just like 1 or 2 more questions. So going back to that student in 8th grade, what I would like for parents to know is how well or how possible it is for students to turn things around. So, you know, some students need more training than others because, as you pointed out, in some cases it's number sense, in other cases it's reading and comprehension. It could be both, right? And there could be other issues that go even beyond what you can diagnose with the test, right? So I know there could be a broad range of issues here, but I think what I would like is for parents to get some kind of sense of how possible it is, again, for a child to be able to turn things around. What has been your experience in that?
100%. It's always possible. However, I'm going to say with the right amount of resources and support. Okay. That's the key. Yeah. Everyone is able to close the achievement gap. Everyone is able to learn. We just need the right amount of resources and support to get there. When I say resources, I'm not even referring just to money. I'm talking about time. I'm talking about someone to move them around. I'm talking about cheerleaders, someone that supports them unconditionally. So I think it's possible. In 8th grade, it is possible. Actually, I think people can start elementary school in 8th grade. If they're 10, 12-year-old, they can start. It's knowledge, acquisition of knowledge. Many of us are getting retrained. We're going back to learn new things, and we learn new languages. It's possible. It's just, do you have the amount of time, financial resources, support network to make this possible? That's the key. If we have parents who are committed and students who are committed, who are willing, it is possible. The tools are out there. It can be done. It just is going to take a lot of support. You know, as you alluded to, if you have a lot more, then you need to put a lot more time into it. If you have a lot less, you need to put less into it. And I'll share one story with you. I had a boy who came to us years ago, and his mom was a medical doctor, and his dad was an engineer. And I say that because you would expect that they're well educated, so they had high standards for him, but he was not meeting the standard, and they were frustrated. And in lashing out at him and talking about to him all the time, he had developed anxiety, and he was just in a very bad state. So when he came to us, we did our assessment and diagnostic, and he couldn't read. And that was his problem. So we finally convinced them that they had missed that part, and he was glossing over word and showing the appearance of reading, and he just wasn't reading well. So mom got it, and mom is like, I'll put any resource behind it. She could afford to. So she put the resources. They started taking classes 3-4 times a week. About 40 hours into his reading program, he went to his mom. He in the car with his mom. He's like, Mom, what is hemoglobin? And the mom was like, huh? Finally, his science made sense. Right. And he moved from getting 20%, 30% on his grade to 100% in science, because now he's reading the book. He's making sense. The conversations at home are now sticking in his mind. He can actually have a conversation with his mom. And I'm sure he's graduated or probably a junior or somewhere in college now. I haven't kept in touch with them, but he was a total transformation. Right. And he came to us about 8th grade. So I remember him when he said that. And in high school, he was top of his class. He was learning. He was doing well. Everything kind of unfolded when he got the missing piece. So to answer your question, I am 100% optimistic. It is possible. It is doable with the right resources, support network, and time. Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So I just have one last question for you. We didn't really talk much about your background, and
I wanted parents to be able to get right to the crux of things. It's of interest to me because I just like knowing where people came from. And when I say come from, I don't necessarily mean country-wise. Just could be what your path was, what your life journey has been. But I'll just save that for my own interest and not impose that upon the viewers. But anyway, this one question though is to try to touch on this just a bit. So I said this in a previous recording, but I love science fiction. And so this kind of has a science fiction kind of tint to it. But imagine you could go back in time and that you could talk anonymously or counsel your parents anonymously. And what you're wanting to do is to help them with a particular point in time in your life. And if you could do that, what age would you visit in terms of, when they were raising you, and what would you tell them?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Thinking about it, I can actually see myself. I would say I was 11, just in middle school. And I would say, Dad and Mom, don't be so scary. I think that's what I would say to them. I think that I would counsel them to use positive reinforcement as a motivation technique, instead of negative reinforcement. I would say take off the pressure in middle school and take the role of a cheerleader. And you've probably heard me say this so many times today, using the word cheerleader for parents. Because when I meet parents, sometimes we have dreams that we haven't accomplished as parents that we're passing on to our kids. And we're putting pressure on them, thinking they can see what we're seeing at 40 years old at 11. They don't see that view, and they cannot see that view. And no matter how hard we press on the view and the perspective, they're going to be 11-year-old at 11-year-old. So I would say to my parents, be a cheerleader, be positive, share your vision and your dream in a way that would be easy to understand for an 11-year-old. So that would be my advice to my parents. If I could go back in time, that would be my advice to parents today who have 11-year-olds. Understand that a lot is happening to middle school at that age. They're trying to figure themselves out. They want to do well. That's key to me. I think parents come to me and say, oh, he's lazy. I'm like, no, he wants to do well. She wants to do well. So they come and say he's lazy, he doesn't want to work, he's always not doing his homework. What can we do to fix it? No, he wants to do well. So that would be my message, like change your language. Give out the seed of belief. Say, yes, I know you're trying your best. What can I do to help you accomplish more? And hopefully these kids will open up and tell you, and they will discover themselves, and learning will be joyful. It will not be stressed. There will be a happy family working together to accomplish success. So you might hear some of my personal view, because I come from divinity. You were asking me earlier. I did, my bachelor's was in biochemistry, so I had a science background. I intended to go into med school. And then along the way, I got into an MBA program, and I thought, oh, I like to in business. I don't want to be a doctor anymore. So I got an MBA and worked for a multinational Procter & Gamble for a couple of years. And I traveled extensively doing that. And then I felt a leading to go into Bible school because I still had the desire to help with human transformation. All of my life, it's about service and human transformation. How do humans get to the fullness of their potential? So I spent 3 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma, getting a divinity degree, and then worked as a youth minister and as a youth pastor for a church here in Maryland, and then started the education program as a result of what I saw with the youth, with the young people I was working with. And we've been doing that ever since. So I still think that being positive, reinforcing our kids in a positive way, helping them get to the fullness of their potential, knowing that they want it as much as we want it. And approaching it from that perspective is what I would tell my parents, and that's what I would tell other parents.
Well, Johanna, thank you so much. This is rich. I appreciate it, sharing your insight and tips for parents, and hopefully they'll be able to take that and to implement much of what they've heard. If they want to reach out to your company? To what would where should they go?
mathetc.org, mathetc.org, and they can also call 1-844-MATH-ETC. MATH-ETC, 1-844-MATH-ETC, or our website, mathetc.org. And they can always get a free consultation. It's free. I'll be happy to talk to anyone over Zoom and share my experience. I believe that as we give out, as you are doing right now, and we're all giving out, will change the tide of the consciousness in education. And we can actually start to really see changes in the achievement gaps with our students, especially the ones that I see every day, the ones that don't have the support system that's needed to get to the fullness of their potential.
All right. Well, excellent. All right. Thanks again. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I did. I appreciate all of the time that Johanna spent sharing her insight, sharing all of those amazing tips. In particular, I found it really interesting to think about the possibilities of helping students with abstract concepts by having them measure the area of the table, or measuring the area of a rug, or counting steps, counting other items in the house, or even participating in cooking and thinking about the measurement that goes along with cooking. So those are all great tips. I hope you'll consider sharing them with your extended families, discussing these kinds of things at the cafes that you go to, and also you would consider subscribing. I have other people that I'm still going to bring on and talk about a wider range of topics, and to think about sort of the broader picture as well. So even though tips are important, the broader picture is also important. So anyway, until that time that you join us again, thank you again and have a great day.